What do you and I need to stand up to, speak out about, and to push back on in our life, in our world? And what factor or force always beats hate in our lives and in the world around us? Hey, my friends, welcome back to the UNCOMMODiFiED podcast and to another Uncork conversation. My guest today is Alan Quarry. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim.
Awesome. Great to have you. For those of you who don't know Alan, quick synopsis. This is far too much to make a synopsis in 2 or 3 sentences, but I'm going to give it a shot, Alan. Alan's life and career has been both, I'll call it, vast and virtuous. It includes being a university lecturer, brand architect, entrepreneur in residence, which, by the way, that sounds kind of cool, founder of Quarry Integrated Communications, founder of barn raising associations, board member of several profit and non-for-profit corporations and organizations, and the founder of HeartBeatsHate. And that's what our conversation is going to be about today, a grassroots global movement that has a powerful belief. Here's the belief. Their movement, Alan Quarry, believes that hate is a choice and that together we can triumph over hate in all its forms and make our homes, our schools, our communities, and the world better. And I love the order of that mandate, Alan. I love it a lot. And as all great conversations sort of kick off for me, a question and a drink usually makes more sense. So I'm going to ask you, sir, what are we going to drink together? I'm going to have a non-alcoholic beer today. What do you got there?
I'm having a fully caffeinated coffee.
There you go. You got the fully leaded. For those of you listening on the podcast, I don't normally drink non-alcoholic beverages, but I'm going to have surgery tomorrow, so I've been forbade by my surgeon to have alcohol. So today it's just a non-alcoholic beer. All right, let's kick this off with a great question, Alan. Here's a question to start. Why HeartBeatsHate? How did this thing start? And where did it start for you? And how did you get this thing into the world and release it?
Wow. Okay, there's a lot of wide guardrails there, Tim. That leaves me way too much space.
I love it.
I'll give you the edited version. You kind of grow up in your neighborhood, your parents, your school, maybe passed on to you some parts of civilization. And I'm a kind of believer that we should be putting civil back in civilization. It seems to me that what I've noticed probably longer ago, but 6 or 7 years ago, was that the dialogue that we used to have in the not so distant past has now become these monologues, and they're separated and then they're turned into their own echo chambers. Mm-hmm. So that the people of, say, the left side of the equation want to talk, they're going to talk to other people of the left about left type things and totally denigrate the opinions, the concepts of the right-hand side of the equation. Now, as it used to be, you could disagree, but maybe there was some middle ground. Maybe there was some way you could come to a compromise that would allow us to move as people forward. And it became quite disturbing as I saw the political situations and the social situations develop very quickly. They're really on a fast track right now. That they wanted to eliminate any sort of cooperation, collaboration to make things better. There was either going to be one way, and there was going to be one way. And that didn't matter what your political stance was. This wasteland in between now, how people feel is pretty outstanding. So, I don't know, I guess it was about 6 years ago, they had these demonstrations down in Charlottesville, Virginia, around the campus of the University of Virginia, which if you've been to is just fabulous. It's also known as kind of the birthplace of the American version of democracy. Thomas Jefferson was a graduate of Virginia, and he was the key architect on a lot of the scoping out and the phrasing of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. So anyway, there they are, and the irony is you've got people marching around at night with barbecue torches, which threw me right back to like Munich in 1932 or 1933. the chanting that these guys were doing, and they were 100% white, and they were aligned with white supremacists. Part of them were called the Proud Boys, which are very active in stirring things up. Anyway, and I looked at this and I was afraid. Wow, I've got grandchildren now, and they're going to be growing up influenced by these kind of situations and these kind of conflicts that are happening in the birthplace of, democracy. Oh, democracy doesn't work anymore. We don't have time for that. We're going to be busy building, over here. So I guess this was a Sunday morning. I said to myself before noon, after seeing this go on the news circle more than once, the news cycle, I said, wow, somebody ought to do something about that. Which will remind people of Lily Tomlin's line, hey, somebody should do something about that. Wait a minute, I'm somebody.
That's right.
So I guess because my mind is always, I can't slow it down, Tim. I don't know. Not to say that it's all that sharp, but it sure is fast. And, I just thought about this all day. And so I did a search on the internet for an organization or a slogan, a mantra of HeartBeatsHate. I like the rhythm of it, frankly. I can't do poetry. I'm not a poet, but I like reading how, the rhyme, the cadence, the beats happen. So I like the HeartBeatsHate thing. So I went online, looked around. There was nobody that owned that phrase. Monday morning, I called the lawyers I work with quite a bit and said, I need to own this. I need to own HeartBeatsHate. Well, Alan, explain what that means. I said, well, I'm not sure what it means yet, but I just want to make sure that when the meat is on the bone of HeartBeatsHate, that I'm not worried that some right-wing group or some left-wing group has taken it. I want it for a particular cause I'm thinking of. So they had that cleared, I think, by the end of the day, and by that time, I started to talk to people, and I thought we were actually going to be more of a political movement, that we were going to be aligned with Black Lives Matter or, other forms of social issues that needed to be addressed. But I soon found out actually that if we tried to align with other dissonance, then it was a whole different set of rules. We had to qualify in order to be aligned with, and there was a lot of, hassles and things. And I said, well, wait a minute. What is the real root of this thing? Yeah, it's HeartBeatsHate. But how does that get started? How does HeartBeatsHate get started? And I remember hearing Bill Clinton speak once, and he said that peace in this world will come from around the dining room tables and around the kitchen tables and around the, the family room. So it has to start, as Clinton explained, it really has to start there. It can't be politicians forcing it down. It certainly can't be militants forcing their stuff down. It's got to come from the thing up. So I guess by Tuesday morning I figured out, well, this maybe is a grassroots movement. And I don't think that there should be a icon or a leader or somebody. I think everyone's a leader in this, and that, we want to be able to bring the message that, hate is a choice. You may not want to make it. Heart or love or kindness is usually a better way to go, and it's been proven over the last couple of thousand years. In any case, then that sort of led to, a little bit more thinking about what we wanted the movement to be. And let's all be kinder is our mantra now. And the kindness, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in the schoolyard, whether it's in, the shopping mall, whether it's in your neighborhood or your community, nothing goes wrong if you're kind to someone. If if you're actually, just even in the moment, offering some sort of support, some sort of, solidarity, some sort of friendliness, it starts to, I think, and we'll talk about brain science later, but, it has been proven by science, by universities and research, etc., that kindness is it's contagious. And you may not even realize by the end of the day that one or two things that you might have done that was considerate, that was civil, that was respectful, over that period of the day has changed somebody else's experience. It really is, we as humans, for some reason, and I'm a super introvert, but for some reason, there are people who like to be friendly, and they like other people, and now we've got to battle loneliness. The Surgeon General of the United States comes out a couple of months ago and says, "Hey, the biggest health issue we have right now is loneliness."
That's right.
And
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's crazy when you think that we are such a connected society, but yet loneliness is on the rise. And what I love about the conversation and just the way that this thing happens is that it's as you describe it, it's like you're sitting there musing to yourself, what can I do in light of this sort of massive thing you're dealing with? And what I like about the idea of your movement and what attracted me to this, first of all, I followed you, Alan, on social media for a long time. I mean, I've been part of this. I wasn't born in this community, but I was raised in the community where we lived together in the Waterloo region. I left for 20 years. I was in Oakville for a long time, came back to the community in 2012. And getting back connected to the community. And I years ago, I had a very, sort of casual connection with you in business. You might not even remember this, but I was a publisher of a local business magazine. Your business was this was in the early to mid 80s. Your business was just probably just starting at the time. And so I had some connection there. You were always on the forefront of things, very brilliant, very bright man, building this business and trying to figure out life. But I look at your journey and all the things you've done. And then I look at this movement. And as I watched it unfold, and I'd follow on your social media and see you in some social circles here, what really attracted to me and why I want to have the conversation is, what I love about it is that I do think that, unfortunately, we think that, that we're going to legislate kindness. We're going to change the world through legislation and through partisan ideals, and one party is going to have this idea and somehow it's going to free everybody, and that's just nonsensical. And I also love the fact that you're addressing the core issue, which is that if I eliminate hate in my heart and you eliminate hate in your heart, then we have less hate. But when I'm waiting for somebody else, or I'm waiting for some system to create a systematic change that's going to legislate kindness and everything's going to be better.
Yep.
That hasn't worked for a millennium in relationship to the laws that we've put in place in relationship to how humans ought to interact. So I like the fact that it's addressing the problem, which I hate to admit, the problem I think does reside in me. It resides in my heart. And I remember this from my own experience when I started traveling a lot, did a lot of work in Africa for a number of years. And I saw myself as a rather inclusive person, a person who I didn't feel like had a lot of racist tendencies or hatred in my heart towards certain people groups. I have to admit, then I began to realize, no, actually, that's not true at all. I actually have a lot of stereotypes about other people and about the fear I have of the unfamiliar and all of that. And then I began to think about that, about race and about that ethnicity. I began to think about it in relationship to sexual orientation and gender and all of these different things. And I began to realize that actually I'm part of the problem, because hate's in my heart. And what I loved about the mantra here is it suggests to me that the thing that beats hate is kindness, but that kindness also has to beat in my heart in the same way. So I think it's a powerful, powerful image, and it's a strong provocation. And even as you listen in, I'm going to challenge you to examine your own heart and ask yourself this question: is this just somebody else's problem? Does somebody else's have hate, or do you have hate? Because at the end of the day, if we can understand that maybe we all contribute to some kind of intolerance and we can become more tolerant and more kind, then maybe we have a better world at the end of the day.
it's surprising how effective this will be,
Yeah.
Tim. And I think what you're chatting about, and there's resources available, and it's all about bias, and it's unconscious bias.
That's right.
And what the heck is that? Well, it's pretty simple. You know, culture is another way of saying how we do things around here. And so in our culture, and it doesn't matter what type of title we've given to our generation, as we have grown up, we have followed somewhat in the pathway of our parents and our grandparents, the other influencers around us, whether they be relatives, whether they be neighbors, whether they be teachers, whether they be, religious leaders. And we do build up. We have built up. And I'm so great. I'm so happy you're recognizing this. It's great that we've built up these stereotypes in our head, and we're not even sure what we don't think affect our behavior or our decisions. I know many recruiting firms now and recruiting departments at corporations. They mask the names of the applicants. So that it's no part of the process is someone saying, "Oh, he's Scottish." Out. I mean, there are those things that if we become more conscious, it becomes easier for us to say, I wonder if that was really a stance I wanted to take. I wonder if that was a perspective or a perception that was accurate, or whether my mind got lazy and it just clicked into something that is always hanging around. So I kind of think of it like a knapsack that certainly I've come from a lower middle class family. That said, I had advantages that were consciously or unconsciously available to me. And the way I grew up was, in some ways, Tim, I just assumed that everything was good. And I didn't feel like I was racist. I didn't feel like I was, in any way prejudiced, right? I grew up in the 60s, Martin Luther King, JFK, RFK. I mean, the 60s changed the world temporarily. And unfortunately, we killed those three guys who were changing it. Anyway, that's another subject. The thing about bias is that if we can come to grips with, okay, it doesn't make me a bad person.
Right.
Okay, I'm not, just because I used to think that, or I did say that, okay, I own that. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily, and it shouldn't, slow us down with, these are pretty easy changes to make. I just need to be, a little bit more peripheral in how I see things and how I think about things, but most importantly, how I do things. Because it's really cool, Tim, that you and I share opinions on these things. But unless we share action, unless we actually do something that lines up and demonstrates that's how we feel and that's how we think, because think, feel, do is a common psychological thing. And we, you, me, and we are going to have to keep improving our ability to express, demonstrate, and activate kindness. There's a lot more people in this world that are kind.
Yeah.
I just don't think we've had a voice or encouragement to take that simple feeling, to take that simple passion into compassion, and bring that forward.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
It is so easy. And when I think of MLK, and he's definitely an inspiring figure for me. I've had the privilege of every time I go to Atlanta on business, I always go in a day early, and I always spend time down in that area by Ebenezer and by the Homestead, and there's a palpable. I want to call it's like there's something in the atmosphere around there that I find fascinating. Sure. It just gets in you. And I remember one of the quotes that I read from LK that just really stunned me one time. He said, "Let us practice a dangerous kind of unselfishness," and then he went on to say, "And let us not be unselfish by proxy." And I think this is a really interesting thing because, again, we can't be looking for systems in society to be kind. We have to choose it. And bias is a really interesting thing. I had a really interesting experience years ago when I was in Oakville. We got involved in a community group. We're living in Oakville at that time, one of the most affluent communities in all of Canada.
Very prosperous.
I came from a very low income home. I grew up in government housing. I've had a very privileged opportunity, even though I came from some challenging sort of upbringing. But, I am the 1%. I am part of the 1% in the world. I mean, if you get up and you got food and shelter and everything, you're part of the 1%. And we were involved with a group that was creating a food bank and drop-in center in Oakville for some people. And one of the first people that came in for some help, his name was Frank. I got to meet him. And, of course, as soon as I met him, I had these stereotypes about who he was and probably what he had done and all this stuff. And, it turned out, interestingly enough, is that Frank was the only non-homeless person who actually came to the drop-in. And the interesting story is that when I learned about Frank's life, because when he came in before, he was one of them, this sort of, he was them.
Right.
And then when I get to meet Frank, what I realized is Frank was Dr. Frank. And Frank was a physician who struggled with a very serious cocaine addiction over his life. And as a result of that, kiboshed his practice, kiboshed his family relationships, and he still, though, was quite well off.
Yeah.
But he found that he primarily identified at that point in his life with actually people who were homeless and who needed help. And Frank would come, and I'll tell you, when I realized about Frank's life, and Frank wasn't the only person. I would meet these people, and I began to delve into their lives and find out who they were beyond just the fact they were homeless or, they had schizophrenia or whatever. And I began to realize that these are real people with real stories that are complicated. And some of my prejudice began to fall off about how I saw them. And, I often saw these people, frankly, as milking the system, taking advantage of things. And then I began to realize that I was full of judgment, criticism, for other people, and I had to start addressing that in my life. And to your point, I had to stop just thinking about breaking that cycle, and I had to start doing things that would break that cycle. And my wife and I are still involved, and my wife more now just because of business commitments and different things going on in my life. My wife is still involved in an organization in the local area who actually keeps helping that kind of population. And we start to realize again that we're all an inch away, particularly in this time in economics, we're an inch away of finding ourselves in difficult situations. And we have to learn how to love and respect and care for one another in a much more practical way. So as you work this out as an organization, okay, so HeartBeatsHate now is this grassroots movement that's finding its way, figuring it out. It's very small, it's very boutique, and I love that. It's not this big structured thing with a bunch of, overhead and all that kind of stuff that can come in this world. But what are some of the most practical things when we talk about, what do I need to stand up to? What do I need to speak out about? What do I need to push back on? What are the most practical ways do you think that we can just do this?
Well, I think, again, because we've grown up in a community, and the community has, certain standards of practice or guardrails around what's acceptable behavior and what's not. And some of that then goes into the legalities of behavior, frankly, and now we're seeing more hate crimes being prosecuted. They're being identified and prosecuted, and that can't be a bad thing, and maybe that's where legislation is positive in this whole thing. But I think, Tim, you and I have to encourage ourselves and others to be upstanders as opposed to just bystanders. The bystander is someone that doesn't make them a bad person, but here we go, sees a bullying incident happening and decides to just walk on by. A bystander listens to a joke that's ethnically irresponsible. It's hurtful. And the bystander doesn't say anything. The bystander sees some paint being slashed across someone's front door or their garage door or something, and doesn't say anything to stop what the perpetrators are doing, or show up with a bucket and warm water and a couple of sponges and start to wash the hate language off the neighbor's house. But the bystander goes inside and closes the door and maybe says to themselves, "Whew, glad that's not me." Now, what's on television? So, the changing of the behavior of being just a bystander, not being involved, into becoming what's known as an upstander. So the upstander, I worked with a contractor years ago, and we had a great relationship, and she was great at what she did, and we used her several times. I was with her once, and we were talking about some costs and some overruns, and she used a really prejudicial term to verbalize how she was going to cut some of these costs and whatever and get back on estimate. And my eyes went up a little bit, my eyebrows went up a little bit, because I didn't expect this person to say that. So what was I going to do? I knew we had another couple of months to work together. So I said, okay, can we just stop there for a minute? I find that term or that thought bubble, I just find it offensive, and I would prefer if I never hear it again. And she was like, "Oh, okay, well, sure, no problem." And that happened 20 years ago, and I think about it back, not to give myself the hero cookies about, boy, that was really a move. No, it was just how simple the other person took that as yeah, okay, fine. It wasn't like the other person started to argue back. So you can be a bystander or an upstander. The upstander doesn't necessarily feel any whiplash from their action. The thing in the neighborhood, this happened 2 years ago. There was a situation in Waterloo. Waterloo is this giant melting pot of different cultures and ethnicities and whatever else, because of the universities, etc., and the high-tech areas. Somebody in a fairly prosperous subdivision attacked another person's house, red paint, go home, insult, front door. The neighborhood association made a call that night to, I guess they sent out some sort of email blast or whatever, but they made the call, we're not going to stand for this in our neighborhood. So the association, which was 140 households, said no. So what did they do? They went and met with the family. They asked what they could do to help, because they would appreciate the opportunity to wash this paint or this dye or whatever it was off the house, that the family that had been attacked by this hate crime didn't have to go out and expose themselves to more, whatever, abuse. So they did that. They did that night. So in the morning, the kids that lived in that house didn't have to go out to the school bus and walk by this, hatred. Then the president of the housing association, the neighborhood association, called me and said, "Look, Alan, can I get 100 of your yard signs?" Which are simply say, "Let's all be kinder, HeartBeatsHate." And they're printed on both sides. And I said, yeah, sure. By sundown, the night after this hate crime had happened, there were 100 of that community's neighbors with the HeartBeatsHate signs up. They'd done their good deed in helping clear up the paint. And the family felt that they had some support. And that's what bystanders don't offer. Upstanders offer support. You know, yeah, I'm sorry that happened, or whatever. And we're going to help correct it because you are part of our neighborhood, and our neighborhood sticks together.
Wow.
And that's really, you know, it had nothing to do with my movement, our movement, but they saw it as a tool the next day to show the solidarity of thought. Let's all be kinder.
Yeah, and that, you know what? It's so powerful because like that story is so interesting because I read a book years ago, excellent book called Getting to Maybe. And I think you've talked about that book.
Yeah.
You've seen that book, and it's a great book. And by the way, if you're looking for it, you should go grab it. It's called Getting to Maybe. It's a phenomenal book, and it's about really how social change happens. That's what that book's about. It's very powerful. Yeah. But there's a piece in there that I think is so important for people to understand because I think what happens is we see these events in our world, in our community, you know, wherever we see it. You know, your kids see an event at school, or you see an event, or you observe something. So you become an observer. And again, if you're listening in, I think this is a great challenge that Alan's giving you. You become an observer of something. Now you have an opportunity. You can stand up or you can stand by. You have a choice. And this is a powerful, powerful challenge. You can, and if you just stand by, you're not going to make the same impact than you stand up, and you got to stand up to a lot of things. But the problem is, and they identify it in this book, Getting to Maybe, is the fear they talk about. There's one line in the book that says, the fear of our own insignificance, that the little thing that we can do in the sea of hatred is so insignificant that that sense of insignificance causes us to do nothing. And then it goes on to say, and when many do nothing, nothing is done. And this is, I think, the biggest challenge in this discussion, Alan, because we look at the sea around us at times, and it feels a little bit, I mean, we're recording this podcast in the end of December 2023. It'll probably go live in early January 2024. And we are living in a sea of hatred right now. I mean, we've got hatred on global stages right now. There always is in the earth, but we've got this hatred that is so palpable coming at us. And so this fear of insignificance, I think, is it's such a controlling factor because we start thinking, well, what's the point of all this? And I think this is to your very point. When we start just observing and standing by, we are not contributing to something different in essence and nature. And I guess back to what you said about Mr. Clinton, it really starts in our homes. It starts in what we teach our kids, what we teach each other, how we demonstrate love, care, and compassion, and even maybe to ourselves, Ellen. Because I had a guy on my podcast recently. His name is Rob Bell, and he's a interesting guy, a 14-time New York Times bestseller author, written tons of books, really interesting guy. And he has this phrase that he uses because he's been on a personal journey for a long time, and he recognizes that there's certain things that he used to believe or say even that he doesn't today. And he has this way of describing, he says, he owns it. He said, yeah, that was me. But he'll say, but that was 13 Robs ago. Yeah. And then he would say, look, I'm on a journey, okay? And he talked about, and even in the podcast, he's talking about, look, we need to be kind and compassionate and tender to our former selves. So this is, I think, the important thing for me in this is I look back on things that I did and said over my life that I am absolutely mortified by, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what I'm learning is that to hate that or to hate me isn't the solution, because heart beats all hate, that I actually have to look back on my former self with a sense of tenderness and saying, that was 13 Tims ago. Yeah. And Tim's in evolution now, and what Tim believes now is different than what Tim believed then. And I can be kind to myself and my own journey, but I also have to challenge myself to eradicate hate and intolerance in me. And that to me makes this such a powerful conversation for this moment in time.
Absolutely, Tim. And you look at the brain science. Well, why would Tim, want to change, or why would Tim, own his past mistakes? Why didn't he just leave them behind there? Well, the thing about being kind, and being kind to ourselves is the same as if we're being kind to someone else, is these neuron transmitters that they can now track in the brain. And this isn't pseudoscience. This is real, kind of Harvard business or Harvard Medical School stuff, Mayo Clinic. I was just reading some stuff from the Mayo Clinic this morning, actually, about kindness. And the serotonins that are released, these enzymes, whether they be serotonin or I want to get this right.
Oxytocin.
Oxytocin, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If that's released, and the whole endorphin ecosystem that goes on up here, which frankly we know more about Mars, I think, than we know about this planet. But it does lift, your sense of purpose. It does. It again. They're tracking this. It even lowers your blood pressure. My goodness. Huh. That didn't cost anything. I'm sorry, Pfizer, but it doesn't need to be that. Now I think, and to what your earlier point, Tim, is we have to be so careful about complacency, because if we stand by, that actually fuels the opponent. That actually fuels the bully. It fuels the authoritative people who believe in their own supremacies. No one else cares. If it's a silence, it's agreement. No. And I'll tell you another thing that you and I chatting here right now, if it's not us fighting back against hatred, who is it?
Yeah.
If it's not now fighting hatred, when's it going to be? And it just has to start somewhere. And, there's a famous comedian, Dennis Leary, who said to a crowd, "Hey, look I've got a 3-year-old. You know what he hates? Naps." So the hatred thing is not coming, we're not born with it.
Yeah.
We're influenced in such a way, consciously or unconsciously, to think that's normal because grandma did this, or my dad did this, or my cousin Edwina said this. I mean, it does become, it's a mission to kind of break down what may already be happening around the dining room table and say, why? Why would you think that? I live close to a schoolyard, and I love watching those kids out there.
Yeah.
It's an elementary school. They play.
Yeah.
They'll move into cliques as they get older, but why? What's the motivation to go into certain groups? And now the groups they're not talking to each other.
Yeah. Listen, there's no doubt, Alan, that we are nurtured into intolerance. I've got less years in front of me than I have behind me now at my age. And the one thing I think I've learned is that we are nurtured into intolerance. And I will say that I have to own that at times, particularly when I was a younger man with my family, I nurtured my kids into certain intolerances based on my own beliefs. And they're moving beyond that, and I'm endeavoring to move on that. And your provocation is really thinking, if not us, then who is it going to be? And if not now, when is it going to be? And we can't wait around for this any longer. We've got to break this cycle of hatred and violence and intolerance, because it is going to continue to polarize us and pull us apart as nations, as communities, and we are going to become something that I don't think any of us really intends to become. But we are going to become so polarized and intolerant that we're not going to ever find the middle anymore.
This is why, we, you, me, we have started. Yeah. And HeartBeatsHate has, we've distributed 1,500 lawn signs in Kitchener-Waterloo, in the Waterloo region.
Yeah.
People are quite proud to have them up on their front lawn. Yeah. I do put them up on boulevards from time to time, but the city's really good at marshaling their resources to put aside our movement, which is, it's okay. You shouldn't be advertising out there anyway. So, these things, and what Heartbeats Hate is looking forward now is to develop programs that can be used in schools, that could be used in church groups, that could be used in, situations, recreational situations, because play is so important. I think the other thing that's important for your subscribers to know is that Heartbeat Hate, we don't have any political affiliations.
Yeah.
We don't have any agreements with corporations. We don't have, we're not funded or promoted by any church group, organized religion, if you will. And so we're just, and I'm never going to ask you for money. It's self-funded. My wife and I have self-funded a foundation. So we're doing micro lending to some social entrepreneurship in the Waterloo region, all that are concerned about kids. We're trying to get, into that group where perhaps we can influence some different thinking, or maybe the little kid will ask why are we saying that, and finding out that whatever reason there was, it simply wasn't relevant or whatever, realistic. So again, this is something that we've got a Facebook group, if you will, I think it's 7,500 members now, and they're from 14 or 20 different countries.
Wow.
So the main thrust right now is in the Waterloo region, but hopefully what will happen, we did have some interest, we have had some interest from the United States, communities, neighborhoods there who are saying, how do we get started?
Yep.
So I think what you'll see in 2024 is, kind of satellite efforts, which is great.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. And listen,
but do it yourself.
Yeah, and listen, I'd appeal to those of you listening. I have listeners in all different parts of the globe. And so, listen, if you're listening into this conversation, we're talking a lot about this place called Waterloo Region, which is an area about an hour sort of west of Toronto in Canada. But listen, if you've got a heart to beat hate as well in this journey, do me a favor, reach out to Alan, connect with him. Is it heartbeatshate.com?
Yes.
Okay, heartbeatshate.com, HeartBeatsHate on social media. You can look up Alan Quarry on LinkedIn, find him there. It's AlanQuarry. I'll be your publicist today and promoter, Alan, because I know this. You won't do this for yourself because it's not about yourself, which is what I love in this. And so, again, I would just challenge you if you're listening. And typically, I end these conversations with asking my guests to talk about themselves. We're not going to do that today. We're going to stick where we are right now. Listen. If you want to uncommodify the shit out of the world that you live in, and what I mean is if you want to eradicate the shit of hatred, then you've got to eradicate it in yourself. And if you want to become the most uncommodified person that you can be, listen, being a bigot and a hater is a commodity. It's a dime a dozen. You can find them on every doorstep and in every home. But if we can rise up and actually champion hate, love for ourselves, take that hate out of our own self, eradicate it, and begin to move with a sense of compassion and kindness towards our fellow human being, we have an opportunity. And I know this from my own journey, Alan, that I actually believe that we are one generation away, always, one generation away from significant change if we don't become hopeless. And my own life teaches me this. I came from a difficult family, fatherless situation, grew up in government housing, and within a generation, my children are in a very different place than I came from. And although I was a fatherless son, I was the best man at my son's wedding. So what I have learned about this, Alan, is that when you start to deal with your own shit in your life, you can change the future in a generation if you make tough choices. And I believe that we have the potential to eradicate hate in the world if we eradicate in us. And that's why I'm all about this conversation, Alan. And listen, if you're listening in, I always say you're listening for a reason. My number one challenge to you is break hatred in your own heart first. And then go out and encourage others to be. And to Alan's words, Stop observing hatred and being a bystander. Stand up, speak out, and push back on hate in your life and the hate around you. Check Alan out in his movement. Become part of the movement, and let's actually make a significant impact on this evil that is in our hearts that can be eradicated for the positive benefit of the people that we want to love in our community. Alan, thanks for inspiring this conversation today, and I wish you tremendous success, and I'm going to keep tracking with you. Thanks, sir.
You and me.
Absolutely. Cheers. Thanks for listening in, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.